Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Today we're going to be sharing a story that will sound kind of sad, I guess, when you think about it, because it deals with loneliness and how loneliness can cause a person to become very susceptible to what is known as catfishing. Catfishing, most of you are probably thinking, well, what does that have to do with loneliness? Well, let's talk about a gentleman who decided to resign himself to his new life alone when he decided to take a chance on online dating after a divorce. But the nice new woman that this person spent long hours with on the phone wasn't who she seemed to be at all. Our guest is going to be offering an insider's look into the world of what is known as online scamming and shares tips for verifying identities, tactics, and catfishers and what they do to lure their marks and methods for protection against fraud. The newest book is called The April Fool, and I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Mr. Nathan Cummings. Nathan, thank you for being on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, a lot of people sometimes, when they're on the outside looking in about a story like this, they say to themselves, well, how could somebody be so susceptible or be so gullible, especially when you consider that you're someone who was basically in what would be considered very meticulous and thorough fields, such as CPAs and teaching, things like that. So let's talk about step by step how all this started and what happened.
Well, I would be glad to present this story to everybody out there. It all started when I got a divorce and moved out. And, of course, when you're sitting in the living room watching the TV, there's nobody to talk to and you get lonely. So I said, well, I'll go on these online dating sites and see what's out there. And sure enough, there was this picture of a beautiful young lady who said she was 63. And I texted her back and said, there's no way you're 63. You're probably 35 at the most. And she admitted, in the next text or two that she really was 37 and that she was really interested in older men because they were more mature and had less problems and things of that nature. So one thing led to another, and we talked and we texted and we had weeks of conversation, and one thing led to another, and I guess through it's a constant contact where you in the businesses where you keep replying and talking to your customers. The same thing with me. She kept talking, and eventually she said, "Oh, I love you," and I said, there's no way. My mind says there's no way that a 72-year-old man would have a 37-year-old woman as beautiful as Angelina Jolie be talking to me, let alone, say that she loves me. But it all goes to kind of like the word halt. You have a hunger for the old times when you were younger and you did do a lot of different things. The A stands for anger because you're angry that you're not able to do these things anymore. The L is for loneliness. And when loneliness sets in, your mind is second best to your heart. Your heart wants what it wants. And then the T is you get tired of the constant onslaught of the requests from these particular women. And they start out slow. They may ask you for $50 so that they could call you. So you buy them an iTunes card. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but you buy them a music card, and they use it, and they call you. And then the next thing you know, they have a major problem. They need money for rent. They need money for medicine for their child. And could you send them $2,000? So you say, well, I guess maybe I could. And that's when my mind, my accounting mind said, hey, this is not right. These people are just playing for a fool. That brought into the title of the book. And so I made a conscious decision and I looked up on the internet and all about catfishing and scamming and things, and there were lots and lots and lots of books about how they do it, but nothing ever talks about the emotional side of it. How you feel about everything. So I said that I'm going to play the game, and I'm going to try to find out exactly how they operate. And so that's why I decided to go ahead and do that. actually sent her $2,000 to pay the rent for her and her grandfather. She was living in Madrid in Spain, and so she needed me to send her 2,000. Actually, it was euros, not dollars. And so one thing led to another. A week later, she says, "I have this inheritance coming, and but the problem is I need to be married." And I said, "Well, that's nice. There's lots of nice young men in Spain." And she said, "No, I want to marry me and you." And I said, "There's no way. I'm in Spain. I just am getting a divorce. Haven't gotten any of the final paperwork and such. I can't marry you." Then I looked online about getting married in Spain, and if you're not a Roman Catholic, there's an extra 6 months to get the paperwork. And if you're not a resident of Spain, there's an extra year. And I'm saying, well, it's at least a year and a half before I can, get this happen. She said, well, my guardian is an attorney, and we can be married tomorrow. He'll get all the paperwork taken care of. And I said, well, great, no problem. What's this going to cost? She says, I just need $3,000 for the bribes to get the paperwork done. And so it just goes on and on. They have all kinds of sad stories about wanting to have, like I say, the rent paid and the money for the briberies to get married. The big thing was when all that was finally done, she needed $25,500 for a bank fee in order to transfer the money from Spain to my account in the United States. So it's kind of what they do. They constantly wear away at you. They constantly, like the water dripping from the fountain, they're constantly attacking you. And if you ever say no, it's you don't love them. You don't trust them. You don't feel that they're worthy of you, and they give you a whole bunch of different excuses, and they lay the blame back on your doorstep as opposed to their doorstep. And after a while, that's where you get to the T in the word halt. You get tired of this constant onslaught of requests, and you say, okay, fine, I'll just send you the money and be done with it. And that's kind of how they work, how they get to you. I also believe that they have a network of people because in the last book of the trilogy, I talk about 3 or 4 other different women who from different parts of the world, who they all have like a script that they read off of. They all ask you, what did you have for breakfast? The same exact words and questions, which makes me tend to think that maybe there's some type of organization to all of this, because 4 women all around the world are not going to say exactly the same thing. So that's what prompted the story. When I wrote this, I said, I really need to get this part of the story out, because there are so many people who, let's say, blame their older mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, sisters and brothers, and they call them, how can you fall for this? How can you be so dumb? Type of thing. And so it's really, they just wear away at your heart. And when you give them your heart, they'll take your money. And it's just purely as simple as that.
Now, was there any point along the way, I mean, obviously you probably had bells and whistles going off at some point, that you had to say to yourself, okay, how much further do I go along with this charade? I mean, how much do I allow, I guess, my heart to break for this victim that seems to have all the answers to these situations that she seemed to be in? It was almost like, it wasn't almost, it was, she had problems, but yet when you shared, well, what about this, there was a solution.
Yes.
It just seems kind of unusual, and it's not to say that you were a sucker, because believe me, anybody can become a sucker when they become motivated by tactics that somebody says, okay, I see your vulnerability here, and I'm going to expose that, and that gets you to become sort of like a child at Halloween. There's the candy being out the door. It's free. Come and get it.
Right.
Well, what's going on there?
Okay. Along the story, after the first batch of money that I sent over, I decided at that point that I either am going to play the game and find out how, in this case her name was Mary, how Mary is going to actually operate, or just, say goodbye and, let my mind take over and my common sense. And I said, I started talking to other people, and there are so many other males and females on these dating sites that have the exact same problem. And they have people with the exact same stories and the exact same answers to questions and concerns that you have. I had a book signing event in the city that I live, and every other person who came up had a story very similar to mine. Even the police officer that I went to report all of this said his mother-in-law was taken for a large amount of money. So this is a common occurrence all across not only the United States but the world. It happens everywhere. And I said that I'm going to play the game until I got to that point where they said they needed $25,000. I said, no, you're crazy. I said, a bank fee doesn't charge $25,000. You might have to pay $250, but not $25,000. So that's when my accounting common sense really kicked in and said, adios, goodbye. We'll talk with you later. They don't quit. She has actually texted and called me back, 3 or 4 times since I said goodbye to her, wanting to, kind of rekindle things. And I guess she felt, well, once you have a sucker, and to use your words, let's just keep trying to see what we can get. Some of the other women that I used in more of the research, same things. You just can't get rid of them. You can block them on your iPhone. You can do all kinds of things. You can delete their emails, but they still keep coming back. And the current thing that these scammers are doing is they're hacking into these dating sites and they're stealing people's profiles. And so they use your profile, but they change the name. They may change a few of the numbers of your age and things of that nature. But they get a profile that they like, and so they're going to use. They hacked into my profile. They hacked into one of the ladies that I was talking to. They hacked into her profile. So they keep coming up with new ways of getting to you so that it doesn't look like it's the same thing over and over again. Very, very efficient, very, very good. And that's, again, what makes me think that there's some major organization to do all this, because most of these women, nice women, but I don't think that they would have the ability to hack into a dating site's computer system. So you're right. After a while, there was just enough is enough, and I'm done. And then my mind took over, and I said, I know enough about what's going on to go ahead and write the book. And so that's what I did.
Now when you think about social networking, especially when you build online networks that can, include people, like secondary and tertiary connections, it seems like that this is a strategy that we're taught that's a good thing. You think about things such as LinkedIn or allegedly Facebook, things like that. And quite frankly, I guess call me old school, and I'm certainly not your age, but within 20 years, I'm not too far off. Beyond 50 is our show, for instance. But,
okay.
I'm a real face-to-face handshake. I've got to see in front of me kind of a guy. I don't care what you pose, over the telephone. The fact is, or, over the telephone or over the Internet, whatever the case is, it was funny because I remember years and years ago, this was long before the Internet, I'll honestly say, I tried my hand at trying to connect with women as I was feeling lonely myself, through, calling on the telephone and these, call them phone dating sites, I guess. But they weren't sites then. They were just phones. So it was funny because I found after 3 times of actually connecting and meeting face-to-face with these women, as sweet and resounding as they sounded on the telephone, they never actually looked or really were who they were. And I was like, I'm sorry to say this, but it seemed to me that they were basically single welfare moms that had plenty of time to sound like they had that bedroom voice that you just wanted to be enraptured into. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I've had enough, and I just put it away. And fortunately, I didn't have any bad situations outside of maybe the possible disappointment of the end result of meeting these people. And I wish all them luck. I'm not trying to sound like a hard guy here, but I said from now on I'm just going to meet somebody along the way of pursuing my own interests. Now, even that situation can lead somebody into trouble too, but the alarms seem to go off faster. But it amazes me that through something like the internet and through these networking sites, dating sites and so forth, that in us knowing that this has a higher rate of potential for going south, that we still buy into it. Why is that?
Right. Because your heart wants what your heart wants, and it takes over all your common sense, and it just says, maybe it's true. Maybe she really does love me. Maybe she really does want to marry me. I've even, said to Mary and to a couple of the others, I'm going to catch the next plane and I'm going to fly to Madrid. I'm going to fly. There was one from Ghana. I'm going to fly to the capital city, Accra, and let's meet up and let's talk. And they all say sure at first, but then the closer you get to the actual date of departure, something happens. Don't come. It's just one story after another. Matter of fact, Mary was living in the city before she went to Spain, and I went and I actually found the house where she lived. And I went up one Sunday afternoon and knocked on the door. And I was saying, God, what happens if she actually opens the door? What am I going to do? But fortunately, there was nobody home, so I didn't have to think on my feet very fast. But like you, I wanted to dig deeper into all of this stuff and to try to find out exactly what they're doing. The pictures that they have a stable of models that they take pictures of. Reason I did is I know that is I had another one who answered on the dating site who used the exact same pictures as Mary, and I'm saying, God, how can that be? And so nothing that these women say is true. They all, other than the fact that they want the money and they try to tell you ways of getting to them. Western Union, MoneyGram are very, very careful now about sending money to any of these 4 or 5 different countries that are predominantly known for the scammers. You have to go through so many hoops just to be able to send the money to them. The next thing is they have you buy these music cards because they can cash those in and they can actually get cash or merchandise from stores that they can go and sell on the street. They have, again, all kinds of ways, and every time, like MoneyGram and Western Union closes down a way, they come up with another one. These people are really shrewd. They're really sharp. They don't take no for an answer, and they go after anything and everything that they can. It's just kind of sad, but that's the reason why I wrote the book. I wanted people to know the emotional side of all this, and that when you start getting into this position, you can say, wait a minute, I heard from this one guy who lives over down south somewhere that I don't. This is all lies. This is all fake. There's nothing real about all this, and all they really are is after my money. Dr. Phil has had several TV shows like this. From what I understand, Tyler Perry is making a movie about all this. So there's lots and lots of people trying to react, but sometimes it's just too little too late.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that, especially if you've been on the receiving end of this whole thing for quite a while. And what I also want to note, too, is although Tyler Perry, or is that who you said it was?
Yes.
Okay, is making a movie about this, just to let the listeners know, there was also a 2010 documentary film that actually created or made the term catfish popular, and this also morphed into a series as well on MTV. So this actually goes back quite a ways that somebody was saying, hey, guys, and in the series it actually follows a guy that, and a young woman who it talks about how these guys as a couple kind of follow this whole thing along and really showcase the kind of deception that you're talking about here.
Right. Yeah, it's sad, but you just have to try to make this known to people, and to know that you're not in it alone. Talk to people, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your kids, your brothers, your sisters, talk to your pastor, your preacher. You're not alone, and yes, you're lonely, and you wish you had somebody to talk to, but you're not in it by yourself, and you don't have to send anybody any money. In fact, that's the disclaimer that's on all these dating sites now, is you promise not to send anybody money. And the same thing with Western Union. If you have these 4 or 5 countries, they try to say the same thing. You do not send any money.
And really, why can't you possibly become interested in somebody who's in your own zip code?
Yeah, exactly right. And you can do that on the dating sites. You can limit the mileage from your house as to the potential matches that they might set you up with. So yeah, you can do that, and you really should. And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, you really should only be about 30, 40, 50 miles from your home, because the travel is a killer. If you have to drive 100 miles to go on a date, then you got to drive 100 miles back. There's something wrong with that picture.
Now, here's also something that I wanted to bring up too as well, Nathan, especially in reading the April Fool, because I like how you detail a lot of the texts and the interactions you were having. And in fact, it even goes as far as there was a point where you were interacting with Mary's lawyer.
Right.
And you look at this and you go, and it's nothing to jab at you, but I'm sure people look at this and go, God, how come this guy can't see this? But again, like you said, and this is so true, when you're in that moment, when you're the person, you don't see these things, and there's a reason behind this. Now, when you think of sociology, the way that we behave, especially when we interact with other people, first of all, humans are certainly group or herding creatures. We are people that need to be together in groups to be successful, to actually survive, So one of those behaviors, and if you actually look out in nature, horses actually have this same behavior, believe it or not, because they know they can't survive on their own. They have to be in groups. Now, that being said, one of the first, almost call it a hardwired behavior, if you will, which it probably isn't, but it's pretty close to it, is that need to be accepted. Okay? That if we don't feel that we're accepted, that we're part of this, then we're shunned, and that's pretty painful. I mean, death almost seems not quite as painful as being shunned. Now, the thing about this situation is that as we begin to connect, let's say with whether it's somebody online or whether it was on the telephone, because this is something that was made clear to me, especially as it was happening back in the day before the Internet, is that what I was noticing is people seem to want to throw up what I called the peacock feathers, the best of ourselves.
Right.
And one of the clues or the keys that I was picking up on is, well, the beauty of doing or getting to know each other this way is you get to know who I am. Okay? Now, that may be true to a degree, but I'm sorry if I want to sound like a narcissistic kind of a guy here in a way, but I want to be able to assure that if I wake up the next morning and you're laying next to me, that I'm going to enjoy what I see. I guess.
Absolutely.
So, I'm getting to know you, but is that the real you? And I'm sure that over time, as we're connected together, that real you think you are on the phone or whether it is online is definitely going to disappear, and you're going to have to figure out, now, how do I continue to showing you the best of me? So.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, because you don't know. I didn't know whether Mary was actually a male or a female. They show you a picture.
Well, you were texting them.
Yeah, and they'll email you more and more pictures. But like I say, they have these portfolios of all these different models who they use their pictures over and over and over again. And it's like, okay, but it might be a man that I was talking to. You never know. So it's you always got to be on your guard as to things. So your point is very, very valid. You need to know. So that's why you should try to meet up with them, or what is it, FaceTime, where you can actually Skype, where you can actually see them. But they stay away from that. They really don't want to do anything that tips their hand, so to speak.
Well, we certainly appreciate you, for one, taking the time to come on the program to talk about something that, seems very vulnerable to your character and who you are. But look, we can all become certainly, motivated by our desires in such ways that we will do things that in retrospect seem tremendously irrational. In fact, to give you an idea, I remember years ago when I first started in broadcasting, there was a woman who was out promoting a book called, I think it was called The Energy of Money. Now, this is somebody who was a psychologist with a very good, practice that was helping people to become better versions of themselves, one way or the other. And she got conned, so to speak, on an investment scam. And she says, look, I wrote this book because this did happen to someone like me, just like it happened to someone like you. And she says, here was the truth of it. And this is when I faced that truth of what happened and how this happened to me, I was able to write this book to a level that I hoped would actually inspire people. And it's actually a wonderful book about the energy of money, what it is, and how to, kind of move forward with your life and your life goals. But she says, the simple matter of the deal is when the opportunity was presented to me, greed came in, and that's what I followed.
Right.
So we're all susceptible. We just have to be aware that it's possible, first of all. And books like your book, The April Fool, certainly help people to become aware of that.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And that's what the intent was.
Now, do you have a website or a way people can find out more about the book, how they can get a hold of it, things like that?
Well, you actually, if you go on to Amazon, you can actually start reading the book online. They have one of these, like a free look type of thing, so you can virtually read the whole book online. And of course, it's on Books A Million and Barnes and Noble too. So, and all three of the books, there's The Man Before the April Fool, and then the third book is Unfinished Foolishness. Those are written because the publishers wanted certain things about how the main character's name is Jack, but how Jack felt on April the 1st when he actually moved out from his ex-wife's house. And then the Unfinished Foolishness was an ending that they wanted to have to be more of exciting. And so I got to use my imagination on the ending. So it's kind of cool. But anyways, so the three books are written, and maybe I should have written it as one book, but they said not to write it so it would be like 400 pages, because that would be too much for somebody. They won't have the interest to read through the whole thing. So we did all that, but it's kind of exciting. I wrote it like I say, to try to tell people what happens. Yes, I was the one who was I don't want to say made a fool of, but I did it on purpose because I wanted to find out how they worked, and so that I could actually tell everybody the truth about things. And so it's hopefully it'll help some people not fall for these catfishers, and to be very, very careful about, especially if any of them ever ask you for money, telltale sign, and just turn around and run away, because that's what they're after.
Mm-hmm. And most of all, too, when they start doing something like that, you can say, well, geez, I wonder how you got through these problems before you met me.
Yeah, exactly right.
That, and also, I would also suggest fine-tune yourself by rewatching the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Steve Martin.
Yep. Right.
Oh, Nathan,
right.
Thank you so much for being on the program today and sharing your story.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me on.
You bet.
All right.
The book, again, is The April Fool. Our guest today, Nathan Cummings. So make sure that if you're somebody who's dealing in social networking as well as perhaps online dating, hey, if you can't see a face and you can't connect with a voice and there's no way to connect at all, they start asking for money, well, hey, go the other direction is probably the best suggestion I can make. You can also discover more at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50, we do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, where you will find some of the greatest things going on in the Beyond 50 world, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.